Good afternoon, everybody, and a very, very big welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us today on this Friday afternoon. We are very, very excited to be talking all things bitter hop extract today. So we will be looking at what the extract is, how it works, how to get the most from it, what results people are having, maybe even some challenges people are having. We have a lot of questions for Naturopath Nathan to answer today. So if you have any additional questions that we don't cover, please pop in the chat box, and if we have time, we will answer. But I think we have a lot of questions for Nathan already, so I think we will have his time well and truly filled today. So I would love to introduce you to Naturopath Nathan. Many of you on the call know Nathan. You know that he has become very knowledgeable about this topic and about this particular extract. And he has done a lot of research. So by profession, he is a naturopath, a herbalist, and a nutritionist. So did a triple degree and has a lot of knowledge, as well as being a practitioner. He is also a big researcher. So he's not somebody who will just start talking about something without really understanding and really, doing the research to see what science is saying about it. So very, very lucky to have Nathan in our community to be able to help us to get the most out of the results that we are all seeking using this particular extract. So are you there, Nathan?
Yes, I'm here. Can you see me?
I can, absolutely. So what we might do, Nathan, is we're not necessarily going to have a PowerPoint today, or Nathan might have a couple of slides, but we just wanted to cover for, especially for the newer people, might be a little bit of revision for the people who have been around a little bit, but just basically what the extract is and how it works. So we are calling Bitter Hop Extract 3. So I thought it actually might, the first question, Nathan, before we really get into the nitty gritty, for those people who think, well, what does the 3 mean? So if we see that abbreviation BHE3, what does the 3 mean, please?
Without really being told by the trademarkee what they're referring to, I would say that the 3 is referring to the 3 bitter acids found in hops. There's an alpha, a beta, and an isoalpha acid. So BH, bitter hop extract -3 would for me say the 3 bitter acids within hops. That's the extract that they have trademarked.
Fantastic. Thank you. That is awesome. Really appreciate that. And once again, more for the newer people, for those people who don't know what bitter hop extract is or how it works or what its purpose is, could you just give us a general overview on how it works and how we can use it to support us being in a healthy body?
So hops, as naturopaths have used for centuries, is the whole plant, the flower, and it closely resembles like cannabis plant, for example. It grows outside on a vine and has little terpenes. And as we use the whole flower extract in a liquid herbal, you might get that from a health food store or a naturopath, or you might find it in a capsule or a tablet. This is used predominantly for like menopause, for anxiety, for sleep. But when you take that flour and you get kilos and kilos and kilos of that flour, and you extract the bitter acids from it, you're removing those in isolation. You're removing all the flavonoids, all the glycoproteins, all the polysaccharides, everything that's not the bitter acids that are being removed, and we're left with bitter acids. And these bitter acids have been shown that when we actually are putting it into our body, we have receptors lining our small intestine and gut waiting for these acids. And because they're bitter, they bind onto these receptors and it sends a signal up our vagus nerve to our brain, and then a bit of magic happens. Our body starts to release its own gut peptides. Some of these peptides might be to do with glucose regulation, blood sugar control, appetite suppressant. This might be a GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1 action. It might have to do with cholecystokinin. This is more to do similar to the GLP in terms of regulating appetite, but it's also breaking our food down easier. So it's helping with protein, with carbs, with fats. And so it takes some of the stress off our body without having enough digestive enzymes, we've now got something that's going to try and stimulate a few different other mechanisms to work in synergy to break that food down. So hopefully we're getting better nutrition from the food we're eating as we're using these bitter acids. It helps with the gastric motility. So once we have put that bit of a handbrake on and told the brain, hey, let's slow down, we don't need to eat as much, we then get the food to move through the body a lot quicker. It increases peristalsis. So it's moving the food throughout the body and improving both the digestive ability of that food, the nutrient absorption, but also the frequency of your bowels. And then there's the whole other aspect of what happens in the brain beyond the gut. We're seeing in the research for the bitter acids, whenever you research mature hop bitter acids, the research is talking about things like the vagus nerve. And when that can help calm the brain down, it's helping to calm down mood and anxiety. There's even some long-term cognitive benefits. The biggest, I guess, draw card and the carrot that people are drawn to is the fat loss aspect, right? Because it's increasing thermogenesis, which is the breakdown of fat to create heat, thermogenesis. And so some people's mechanisms are not the best, and so it needs a bit of kickstarting. But this is just one of the many aspects that the bitter acids have for our health when we take it. So that's a bit of a quick snapshot of some of the things that it can do.
Awesome. I think I needed to be taking notes there. Maybe if we get a chance or if somebody could translate into or scribe into the chat, I liked your definition of thermogenesis. Can you say that again? And somebody clever might be able to put that into the chat, please.
Thermogenesis is just the breakdown of fat to turn into heat.
Okay.
So all the visceral fat stored in our body, we're breaking it down to fatty acids, and then it's going into our brown adipose tissue, where the mitochondria in there is essentially turning it into both energy and heat. When we say thermogenesis, that is the heat component.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Awesome. So,
The studies are showing that really probably takes for the fat loss component 12 weeks, because leading up to that, there's actually a lot of other things happening within the body. And from practical experience, you can take something to help lose weight, but you might be losing muscle, you might be losing nutritional fat, you might be losing structural fat, you might be losing subcutaneous fat, which is like just what's just the surface, or you might be losing visceral fat deeper within. That you don't have a real priority when you just, on any fat loss or weight loss protocol, your body kind of is just, we don't know what's being lost as we're on the scales unless you're testing for it. But with the hops, it does appear that they are more focused on visceral fat. But before the body can get to that, there's so many other mechanisms that need to be in place first before the body's like, yeah, okay, it's safe for me to remove the toxins stored in that visceral fat. So that's why in the studies they ran it for at least 12 weeks, because that might, a good half of that might be for helping with inflammation, helping to heal the gut, detoxifying the body, reducing stress, improving sleep, all the prerequisites for the body to say, yeah, okay, now it's safe for the environment to pull more toxins out of that visceral fat along with the fat and eliminate it properly.
that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Nathan. And actually, you pretty much answered the next question. And I see Maria's just asked a similar question. So why am I not getting results? Why am I not releasing fat yet? Why aren't I seeing it on the tape measure or the scales or the various apps and things? And that really does make sense. And I guess, we do want to cover this because for some people, especially when they're jumping into the Facebook group and they're seeing, so many people getting pretty quick results with fat loss. And then they're like, why aren't I getting them? Why isn't it happening for me? So please do be patient. What is the minimum time, Nathan, that the practitioners and the studies are showing that we should be on it before we start panicking to say, this isn't working for me?
Depends what your definition of this isn't working. Like what is
Okay.
not working?
Well, let's say for fat loss, let's just say somebody's jumped on it for fat loss. They want to see a physical difference, be able to put their genes on, see a physical difference with fat coming off of their bodies, etc. So for those who are perhaps not seeing that as quick, what is the time period that they should be patient towards, if that makes sense?
I would wait the full 12 weeks. The studies do say that when compared to placebo, that there was a differential between the two as time went on. So like placebo and the active being the bitter acids, the first week, there may not have been much happening between the two groups. The second week, the bitter acid, the active group, started to show better symptoms in all different areas of the body and better fat loss. And as the weeks went on, the symptoms got better and better and deviated further and further away from placebo. So without, delving into the study and looking at what are the exact patients that they were using and who did they exclude, it's a hard question to answer because fat loss, you can either force it off, and sometimes think about it this way. Our fat is a protection mechanism for our body. So if you have just our fat cells, adipocytes, they actually think of them like a balloon. You can chuck a certain amount of fat in there, and then let's say you've only got a certain amount of balloons, these fat cells. When they become full, the body doubles them in size and then quadruples them in size. There's a certain length that it will go to before it starts to try and add more on. But if you've just recently filled up a whole bunch of them, let's say they've just expanded and the physical room, they got more, you've got increased size, however long it's taking you to put on the fat. You've just recently added more fat to the adipocytes. If you have then done something like take the bitter acid extract, it might remove a certain chunk of that fat that was recently added to your fat cells. And so you might notice that, in 2 to 6 weeks quite quickly. But then beyond that, the stuff that's been there for quite some time, for months, for years, for a decade, who knows how long, the body's like, right, I've removed what I can safely. What has just come on through inactivity, overindulgence, but everything else that's there that's full of toxins, and the body's still inflamed, and you're still stressed, and you're not sleeping, and you're hormonally imbalanced and you're really acidic, you haven't changed your diet, that section of the fat cells from that point on, the body will be quite stubborn. It's like, I'm not going to let you release more toxins into circulation when you're not even getting up and moving. The lymphatics are stagnated. You're not exercising. You haven't done anything to help deliver kidneys, lymphatics, bowels, or spleen. But that's where we see in fat loss there be a change in some patients that are cleaner, they've had less going on within their life, and they themselves, also might stall because they might have the last section of their adipocytes were filled with fat, being able to remove quite easily, but then now they're getting into the deeper stuff and they just need that extra work to help create an environment that's safe to remove that fat. That doesn't mean nothing's going on though. Like in the background, if you were testing pathology and you took a very good detailed medical history of yourself, often I would find patients, this is now nothing to do with just fat loss, would come in and I'll take a very thorough history and I'd write down all the symptoms and get them to grade it out of 10 and compare it to pathology. And, let's say a month went by and they would come back and they had their, 10 things wrong. And I said, look, what's your priority? And they told me their priority. And I was like, okay, some of that will help straight away, but other areas I can see we need to fix all this underlying stuff first. As we went through the process, they would forget all the things wrong when they came in. Luckily, I documented it really well because, like a month into it, 2 months into it, when they felt like their priority hadn't shifted, in this case, for everyone on here, it's the fat loss, they forgot about all the other problems that they had were getting corrected. And when I went back and asked them, you're telling me you haven't really noticed much change? What about this? What about that? What about this? Then they're like, oh, I don't have that anymore. Completely forgot about that. So when someone says they don't feel like much is going on, I guarantee you, if you're thorough enough in the pathology, in the testing, in note taking, you'll see shifting happen. And look, there's got to be surely a certain percentage of people where for some reason they're just going to need way longer than everyone else.
Yeah.
And it may not be as effective for some reason. That could be a temporary problem, that there's some issue they need to solve first before it starts to work, or they're quite slow to respond. And that's, the minority.
Okay, and that makes sense. I guess it's challenging then for the person who is that person who wants the results. And I know that for me, in my many years of yo-yo dieting up and down, doing different things and having used some diets that do seem to work reasonably quickly, which are very restrictive, but I found that the weight just as easily comes back on as it came off. So this is just an add-on question to what you've been saying, Nathan. So would it be fair to say that using this extract to help release the fat over time for the individual, depending on what else is going on in their body, that it could be a more permanent loss if they continue with the good habits and continue taking the product?
Can you rephrase that again for me?
So, so what I'm trying to say is, with a lot of other fat loss protocols that I've used, I've released the weight really quickly, but it's also come back on really quickly. So is there a difference in using this if it's a slower and steadier process, but maybe that the body might maintain that better than the quick
Mm. I
method?
got it. Yeah. So again, because we are not using a stimulant to force the body into releasing fat in an unsafe environment, there's no like rubber band effect where you've done some crazy diet and taken some pretty heavy duty stimulants to try and push the body to release all the fat without correcting mechanisms. You might be able to lose weight quite quickly on other stuff, but the moment you stop, like the rubber band, it will shoot back and sometimes overshoot and you put more back on. That is because the body says, you forced me to do it in an unsafe situation and you didn't fix anything, and I'm going to put all that weight back on because I need it as a protection mechanism, especially if you have not changed your lifestyle, your eating habits. So with the mature bitter hop acid extract, we are looking for the long-term changes. So if it is pulling you out of fight or flight by stimulating that vagus nerve, pulling you into a more relaxed and digestive state, it's helping to increase some of the gut peptide repair, whether that be breaking protein, carbs, and fats down better, helping with blood glucose control, so long-term metabolic health, helping with sleep and decreasing inflammation. These are all core issues that it's not just putting on weight for people, but long-term chronic health stem from gut, stress, lack of sleep, inflammation. They're the key issues in most diseases. And so, yeah, if you're in 6 weeks and there's not that much happening, but if you were to really look deeper and look at the testing that I mentioned before, then you're probably going to see that the reductions happening internally. Keep in mind that I'm still looking for researchers to, is it just visceral fat that this is breaking down? Because once you've broken down visceral fat, it's not just like, oh, I've lost a kilo. If you've lost a kilo of visceral fat, this is not regular subcutaneous fat we're talking about. Visceral fat is metabolically active, contributing towards stroke, heart attack, diabetes, cancer, and um, yeah, diabetes, stroke, heart attack, and inflammatory disorders. Visceral fat is pushing your body every day you have excess amounts of it into one of these conditions. And just a reduction of 1 kilo of visceral fat, you're reducing some of that risk. The longer you're on it and the more you can persist with it, you're reducing that risk further and further. We can't tell you you're going to reduce your risk or how much. If you look up, this is the way you got to do your own research because I can't legally tell you and make a claim. All I can say is this is the effects of visceral fat. This is how the mature hot bitter acid works on visceral fat. So if you're reducing the visceral fat, and you can look up all the things that it can lead to if you don't do it, you have to come to your own conclusion, see the same conclusion I've made about the importance of reducing that visceral fat. Long term, it may also help with some of that subcutaneous fat. And think about it this way. if you've got various amounts of visceral fat deep within the body surrounding the organs, you have a huge layer of subcutaneous fat on top. So that layer might be quite large. And the visceral fat around the organs, you might be reducing, but the centimeters in weight may not be showing it for two reasons. For one reason, as we break down the fat cell doesn't just disappear. It's still there, and temporarily, the glycerol from the fatty acids being broken down attracts water. So the water is attracted into that fat cell, and then the body will release that water at some point. It could be days later, a week later, and then you'll notice a shift. So sometimes there's almost a delay in breaking down visceral fat to actually seeing it on the scales or on in measurements. Now, if we are breaking down visceral fat surrounding the organs, but there's a large proportion of subcutaneous fat, you may not see that quite quickly in the measurements because the subcutaneous fat is still extending the body part that you're measuring. But around the organ, you're breaking that down, and now the organ's free of it. It may not have pushed the subcutaneous fat out, so when you've removed it, it may not bring it back in straight away. So again, it's don't be hard on yourself. Just because you're not seeing it on the scales and the measurements straight away doesn't mean nothing's happening.
That's amazing. And I've heard you speak many times. And to me, I don't know if you agree with me, guys who are listening in. To me, that sounds like a much healthier way of doing this. Because as I say, I know in the past I've done certain things and it's been very dramatic and calorically restrictive and difficult. I'm much happier to do this not only over 12 weeks, but over 12 months if it's going to be a steady, healthier way of doing it. And I know that on our Facebook group, we have had hundreds and hundreds of testimonials that are not even related to fat loss that people are getting the benefits of. So for me personally, this is something I want to stay on. So when that question is asked, how long do I stay on this for me, and also understanding some of the research related to cognition and so forth, I want to stay on it. And like a lot of us are having really amazing other benefits. I've had a life-changing benefit with the inflammation in my knee and the pain in my knee. I'm not hobbling around like a 95-year-old now, and probably many 95-year-olds were hobbling, getting around better than I was, but I can go on hikes, I can climb again. Like I just wasn't able to do that. So I'm grateful for that. And I know a lot of other people are grateful for a lot of things. But Nathan, you've covered a lot of the first questions we had, and you've touched on this as well, but what are some of the things that you may not have covered already that we can suggest to people that might help maximize the benefits and results that they're getting, and especially if it's a person who's just coming into this mainly for the fat loss aspect, and they might not understand all of the other benefits they're going to get. But how can we advise the new person, what to do to help them get the most benefit?
Okay, so I'll break it down to segments. So physically taking the extract, we are not wanting to absorb it under the tongue. It's the point of getting it under the tongue into the bloodstream, like other supplements, medications. This is not it. We have the enteroendocrine receptor cells aligning the small intestine and the gut. That's where it must bind onto. So I would put it in a small amount of water first thing in the morning and drink it. Let it get down and physically bind onto those cells. Don't just squirt it in the mouth. If you do squirt in the mouth, then take some more water and get it down. But that is easy, right? I haven't found any research that says it's better with food or with fasting. So again, I go back to how do you usually take bitters? If you were prescribed bitters like gentian or feverfew with a naturopath, they might probably say take it before food to stimulate digestion, to help release all those enzymes in the gut to help you break down your meal. So rather than doing it straight away with food or after food, again, until I get better information, I'm going to treat it like a regular bitter and do it before meals, whether that be, 20 minutes before or half an hour before. If you fast like myself, I don't wait until my first meal. I just take it as soon as I get up, small amount of water, and I drink it down. I I have read and they do say 9.5 hours of thermogenic activity. But keep in mind, things have a half-life. It's not going to be ingested and then go 100% effective for 9 hours, then do nothing. There'll be a curve. It might take an hour to reach 100%. It might stay up there for 3 or 4 hours before it starts to come down again. I don't know. So I don't wait the full 9 hours because we are more metabolically active during the day. And there are some sources I've read that do say before 6 p.m. So I take it first thing around 6 a.m. and then I take it again around 1 p.m. So then by the time that 1 p.m. second dose, we've now got, let's say, another 6 good hours before that 6 p.m. mark. And even if we do maintain being more metabolically active closer to going to bed, then, that's 9 p.m. and then it's worn off, let's say. At night, we do detoxify, but we're nowhere near as metabolically active in terms of thermogenic activity than we are during the day. So that's why I prefer to do it as early as possible. And then the second dose, for me, 7 hours later.
Can I just cut in there
So
too, Nathan, because I think this is really important. I think initially a lot of the information was, take it in the evening because we're still going to burn fat while we sleep. So that is perhaps not the most accurate thing to say. Would that be right?
from what I've been able to read, we are burning more fat during the day. We still burn fat at night, but we are storing memories and detoxifying and repairing at night, not really burning fat.
Okay, awesome. That's great. So times to take it first thing in the morning and around about 6 hours later. So if we don't all get up as early as 6 a.m., work it out.
Yeah.
What else should we be doing? There's the obvious things like water. Can you give people the ratio of water they should be drinking per kilo?
Yeah, and keep in mind, this is just all based off my clinical experience and just what I could read. It's not a set guideline. I will always update my guidelines when there's better information available. So for now, this is what I'm recommending. Now, 40 ml per body kilo of water. So let's say you're 100 kilos, that's 4,000 ml equals 4 liters. So 40 ml times however many kilos you are, that's how many ml you need per day, then convert that to liters. That's just enough to break even, essentially. Keep in mind, when we are breaking down fat, it's either in ketosis, ketones, we pee them out, or we're breaking the fat down and we're breathing it out. So if you're a shallow breather, if you're not, urinating very often, you need to drink more water. You need to keep hydrated. You need to flush, help your kidneys clean the blood and flush all the toxins out because there will be a backlog. If you've never done a detox and you have never been a big water drinker, then it's going to be a slow process for you. The better quality you can create your environment, the better food that you eat, the more water that you drink, and make it filtered water. Don't go and drink contaminated, fluoridated tap water full of PFAS. Filter it and get 40 ml in and get a good night's sleep. If you're a night owl, you're missing that portion where your body is detoxifying. Get to bed around 9:30. Get a good sleep. If you're not sleeping well, fix it. This is not just about optimizing fat loss. This is about optimizing health. If you've got gut issues because you're eating the wrong foods, yes, bitter acids do have the ability to be put in any beverage with any diet and still work. But I saw a chiro give a good analogy. It's like digging a hole in sand. Yes, the hole's getting bigger, but it's filling up, and your efforts have to be doubled to keep digging that hole. So stop filling your hole with bad stuff.
Yeah.
Just good diet, good food, good sleep, and uh, there's a different diet for everyone. But if you want a bit of a shotgun approach in terms of what foods to avoid, I like the resource by Dr. Gundry, The Plant Paradox, where he avoids lectins. It's not plant-based. He just avoids lectins. There's still good meats in there. And there's, for the vegetarians and vegans, there's alternatives for those people as well. So that just sorts out what you should be doing on a daily basis.
Um, That's really interesting. And yeah, I know there's one of those I need to improve on, and it's not the water and it's not the diet. So, thanks, Nathan. So I think we've covered a lot of these. How come I'm not losing weight on the scales? I've lost some centimeters, but I seem to be slower than others. What am I doing wrong? Inflammation. So this is a question. It's helped with my inflammation, sugar cravings, and sleep, but not my fat loss yet. Can you tell me why? You've kind of covered that already, but maybe.
I'll summarize it a bit. So again, your body has an order of priority, and its first goal is homeostasis, keeping your body in harmony and safe. If by removing toxins from your fat, it's going to put you into disharmony, disease, then it's not going to do it. If you're really inflamed, you're quite toxic, you're not sleeping, you're stressed, it's not going to jump into fat loss mode. That's why I think, would you say that they're noticing inflammation get better, sugar cravings, and sleep? So it's doing all those things. And remember, I spoke about it's helping reduce inflammation, it's helping with the blood sugar regulation, it's helping with stress and sleep. So these are indicators for you that it's working and it's a priority for the body to get those corrected first, and then it's going to help with the fat loss. And remember, if you just happen to have that body shape, happen to have the specific ratio of visceral fat and enough subcutaneous fat, it's almost like the subcutaneous fat's hiding your results. That the visceral fat is being broken down, maybe slow, maybe fast, but you may not notice it straight away because of that subcutaneous fat still expanding the body part you're measuring. But if you are getting better sleep, reduced inflammation, better hunger control, all those mechanisms are improving, breaking down that visceral fat, that very dangerous metabolically active visceral fat, having the symptoms associated with that reduce, shows you it's working.
It's almost like, Nathan, that we've all come into this with, the fat loss kind of concept, but it's almost like this is an all-rounder. We don't call, what would we call it? Not a supplement. What would you call it? An all-round, what would the word be?
Superfood. It's not, it has adaptogen-like properties, but adaptogen has a definition of things that it does.
Okay.
Hops, from a herbal perspective, is not considered an adaptogen. But
Okay.
again, the bitter acids from the hops, because this is not hops we're talking about in the general sense of going to online or Flannery's or wherever and buying hops. This is like comparing hemp seed and hemp seed oil with CBD. Just because they both come from hemp doesn't mean they have the same actions or the same thing. It's completely different. The bitter acids from hops are being concentrated, and all the other stuff, usually the phytoestrogen activity, isoflavones, flavones, and polysaccharides, have been removed. So I see this question time and time again. I'm worried about estrogen. I'm worried about HRT. From what I read, this is not phytoestrogen. It doesn't have phytoestrogen activities. It doesn't interfere with estrogen because from what again I read, and this is not medical advice, this is just if you go read it, come to the same conclusion. They're removing the bitter acids from the plant, and they don't contain the flavones and the polysaccharides that contain the compounds, the things like 6 and 8 pregnal flavones that are the hormone stimulating ones.
You're answering some of the following questions, and I've noticed also in the chat as well, because a lot of ladies in this space are either perimenopausal, going through menopause, or postmenopausal. So,
Yeah.
any words of advice without making any types of medical claims? And you've explained about the hormonal side of that, because that's another big question as well, just for women in menopause, because really what I'm feeling now is that the fat loss is more of an ancillary benefit to this. And it's like, it does all these things, and the fat loss is an ancillary benefit. So is there something that you could like summarize around this being beneficial? And I know there are other practitioners on here, so feel free to pop in the chat. We've got doctors and naturopaths on here as well. For this demographic, any words of advice on how this could be helpful?
When you actually like break away from the thought of taking a phytoestrogen is going to stimulate estrogen and that being a bad thing, when you let go of that and you go research the properties of how phytoestrogens actually work, like genistein, for example, they are beneficial. They help regulate. If it's high, brings it down. If it's low, brings it up. It's not a progesterone or estrogen. It's not a synthetic HRT that forces a change. the soy flavonoisones, including genistein, are beneficial for hormones. That's why we use hops in patients with menopause. The bitter acids, unfortunately, don't have those properties. But when you do regulate blood sugar regulation and reduce inflammation and fight or flight, i.e., stress, they're all the things that make hormonal challenges worse. So, from that perspective, you correct those mechanisms, it's going to help with the menopausal symptoms. Even though there's not a direct line like there is with phytoestrogen activity on hormones, you're correcting the foundational causes of hormonal dysfunction, and that is stress, inflammation, insulin resistance, and oxidative stress. They're the core problems of heart disease and hormonal disruption.
Wow. Wow, it sure is a general, a good general all-rounder for sure. So we've covered hormones. Okay, somebody asked a question about, are there certain tests you could suggest they go and get from their doctor before they begin?
Yeah, so if it was me, and again, no medical advice, this is just, being someone that loves the ins and outs and to see what's actually happening. Inflammation, I would check. So that's both writing down how you feel, your symptoms, if you've got swollen areas of the body, physically measuring that, taking photos, and via blood tests, ESR and CRP.
Now, what are
So
they? Sorry, ESR.
I'll start writing these down. If you can write them down for me, ESR and CRP, C-reactive protein and acetophyll sedimentation rate. They're just two markers that we use in the bloods to look at, is there inflammation acutely, CRP, or is it inflammation long-term, chronically, ESR. So there's those two for inflammation. We also want to look at glucose. So doing a fasted glucose, and this is nothing to do with taking the product we're talking about. This is unnecessary. You don't need to do this. This is just answering a question about if you were to do tests, what you would do. So please don't think you need to do any of this, because you don't. Um, Insulin, fasting insulin and glucose to look at your blood glucose levels. If you're wanting to look at hormones, go off and do saliva testing for hormones, and then do whether it be cortisol and PSA for men and blood tests, which is not that accurate, but thyroid, I would be checking out TSH, T3, T4. So I mean, there's so many different things you can check, but they're probably some of the basics. So you can look at, is my inflammation getting better? Is my stress getting better, i.e. cortisol? Is my endocrine system, my hormones getting better? So I probably keep it at that and go back to your practitioner and discuss with them your health goals and say, look, I've got something I'm using that's helping in some of these key areas, and I might be doing other stuff at the same time. I want to be able to monitor it.
Right, awesome. And I'll just re-clarify what Nathan said. We are not saying you need to do these, but for people who did want to go and get things checked out, then these would be some of the things that you might discuss with your doctor. Thank you, Nathan, for clarifying that, because once again, we always have to be very mindful that we are not giving medical advice or making any medical or therapeutic claims here. And we're so grateful to you, Nathan, for having done the research and being such a knowledgeable practitioner that understands the body and how it works. That's really, really helpful to us. Thank you so much. So another question that has come in is, what is the difference between GLP-1 products and the bitter hop extract?
So GLP-1 products, and there's medications out there, I won't name them, but you know them all, that people inject themselves with for weight loss, that were originally designed for diabetes, and now there's some specifically for weight loss. But GLP is a gut peptide, the glucagon-like peptide 1, that helps with blood sugar regulation, insulin, and appetite control. That is what those other supplements and other medication are working on, that one mechanism. The bitter acids have that one mechanism, plus cholecystokinin, plus peptide YYP, plus increasing the thermogenic activity, the brown adipose tissue thermogenesis, like the ice bath effect, plus helping with the neurotransmitters like dopamine and epinephrine for the long-term cognitive benefits, plus stimulating the vagus nerve, bringing your body out of fight or flight into rest and digest. plus helping with some of those inflammatory pathways. So we have GLP-1 and a whole bunch of other things at the same time.
Okay. Wow. You use a lot of big words, Nathan. I don't know about others, but I think this is going to be good to have as a recording so that we can go back over and maybe write some notes and just re-listen to stuff that you've said. So that is fantastic. Another interesting question, and you pretty much covered this as well, but you might like to just summarize as well. Why do I feel amazing in the first few weeks on it, and then some of my symptoms start coming back slowly, like sugar cravings and low energy?
I'll try and answer this one quickly, but it's difficult because I don't fully understand the mechanism myself. I've only just seen it empirically, so just what I'm noticing. So when we're looking at a body going through different stages, we have an amazing ability to adapt to different problems and work around them. So if you've started off with one issue and then you've done nothing about it and the body's adapted, and then a time later a second issue has arisen and the body's worked its way around it, you might have a few symptoms by now, but you're ignoring them. Now you get a third issue, a fourth issue, a fifth issue. By the time you've got your, 10th issue, for example, some of the symptoms have just merged into each other that you've had for years. Some of them, your brain is just turned off, like you don't even notice it anymore. You just got used to it. When you start healing, it's weird. We can almost get the body almost says, it's almost like I'm trying to find an analogy in a hospital. There's been a big pile up on the highway. All these people come in and they've got different injuries. And the bit of hops is almost like the main triage nurse saying, you go here, you go see that person, you go do this, you go do that, you go do that, and each thing is getting help. And you notice a temporary boost in a few different areas because your body has stabilized and triaged a whole bunch of different problems that have been going on for years. But just because it was doing that temporarily, that was just to put out a whole bunch of small fires and get you into what it could, a little bit more of a homeostatic balance. But now it's like, okay, now the triage is done and they're all propped up, sticky tape, just holding each other together. I've got to go back and fix this properly. I've got to rip this band-aid off that was holding, all the blood in, go in there and do the surgery and fix it up. While I'll do that, there's probably going to be some symptoms come back while I'm fixing it long-term properly.
Oh, that's
So
a great answer.
that analogy that I gave with like, one problem, then another, when we start fixing stuff, we almost go back through the different progressions of the diseases and symptoms that we had from the very beginning. So you might be, doing something and all of a sudden the symptom pops up that you haven't had for years. Your body's going back through all those issues that have been unresolved, correcting them. I'm not saying that the bitter acid can do this. I'm just saying in general practice, this is what we can see as we are helping our patients go with their current problem. And to fix their current problem, it's because of a build-up of years and years and years and decades. So hopefully that kind of answers that question in terms of why you can get a temporary effect. Think of it like a preview. Your body's like, hey, this is how you can feel. Now that you know, we've got to go do it properly. And to do it properly, it's going to get uncomfortable. But long term, if you stick with it, you'll feel how you feel when I showed you the preview.
That's a great answer. I really like that analogy. I don't know if you just came up with that. It really does help it to make a lot more sense. But you've just made me think of another question to add on to that before we do our last question. So with this in mind, I know what I am going to be choosing for myself because people have said, how long do I need to be on this product for? When I've got to my ideal body weight, do I stop? I'm feeling that this is going to be something that is going to be beneficial for me and my body to continue taking long term, not just for the 12 weeks, not just until I release the fat. What is your take on that?
Yeah, like if you came in as a patient and you wanted some gut healing, 3 to 6 months for one area, gut healing. And remember, gut healing, inflammation, toxicity, it all stems from there. Then hormonal dysfunction, then the fat gain, it all created after the gut and the stress and the lack of sleep became the problem. It can take 3 to 6 months just to fix the gut, let alone even moving on to hormonal dysfunction and then moving on to fat loss. So long term, again, let's be patient. we're expecting one thing to do the action of 100. Like your body is amazing. It's got this resource that can now the replace a lot of other things that have been taken previously, but we can't expect it to do it like that. And it may not be able to do it at the level of taking those 100 other things. So long term, again, you go look at the research of all the different things that it's doing. If you can improve the gut, help the microbiome, reduce inflammation, improve sleep, reduce stress, help reduce the metabolically active visceral fat, long-term cognitive benefits. There's even type 3 diabetes of the brain that we now classify dementia and Alzheimer's as. If you're able to, I gotta be careful what I say, the studies show that there's a good preventative model by helping stabilizing blood glucose and insulin when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia and long-term cognitive dysfunction. Why wouldn't you just like continue? Like this is just too good of a product that it has so many of those actions that we just need to give it time for it to fix all those areas well enough for us, whatever we want personally, whether it be the fat loss or the sleep or the inflammation or whatever it is, we just need to give the body time for us to get to that point. And I think whatever that point is for you, I would be doing two per day until you get to that point where it's like, yep, I got what I wanted. I would then start experimenting and saying, okay, let's see if we can maintain it at one serving per day. And if I start to regain some of those problems, my body's like, hang on a second, I need a little bit more help for longer. Go back to two, and then maybe a month later, go back to one again and say, okay, is one enough just to maintain all this? That's how I personally am going to approach it.
Awesome. And I think that's why I'm excited about getting the tinctures bottle as well, because we can literally put the drops in and we might just decide to do, X number of drops, which could be the full dose or maybe a three-quarters of that dose perhaps. So it'll be a little easier to measure than the snaps. Excuse me. So I think that's actually really a positive that we'll have the tincture bottles there. So last question, and then I think we are getting very close to our hour. And once again, with all of the amazing information you've given, you have covered pretty much this as well, but I'll still read out the question. So what are some good indicators that something is happening in the body, even though I can't see or feel any weight or centimeters wise, like bowel movements, changes of energy, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll read out some of the other practitioners, Dr. Ben's list of improvements of his in his clinic. So he has written a list: feeling fuller quicker, eating less amount of food, less hungry and eating differently, i.e., smaller amounts more often. Total is less than they used to eat, more energy more often, more stamina. Go to the bathroom more or less often, so it's more regulated. Digestion is better, smoother, easier bowel movements, less bloating. I'm going to circle back to what happens if you do put weight on and get bloating. Blood pressure seems to be lower. Breathing becomes easier. Sleeping better, more restful, deeper sleep, waking up less tired, snoring less. Chronic pain and autoimmune issues seem to be getting less. Reduced blood sugar. Mentally sharper, process thoughts better, more clarity, better recall and recollection of things, less headaches and less neck pain. Feeling happier, improved mood, less stress and anxiety, less hormone issues. Clothes fit differently, they become baggy. Body reducing in size, less inflammation, some fat loss, body feels stronger, skin improving, more glow, less irritation, hair thicker, more growth. So there was some of his
Wow.
what he's been noticing because they've had it a little bit longer than us in Australia. So that was his list. Circling
In
back
hearing
to
that list, so just sorry, Nathan, in hearing that list though, when I think about all the testimonials I've been reading on our Facebook group, a lot of those are being noticed. A lot of people are talking about, like I was going in my head, tick, 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 not all for me personally, but just from testimonials I've heard, many of them I was ticking for myself as well. And I hadn't even thought of until you said them. I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was good. Now, sorry, I interrupted you. You were going to circle back.
yeah, so if you are putting on weight and your centimeters are going up, it's very unlikely unless you've deliberately eating more and drinking, things you shouldn't be, you're not going to be putting on fat. If you are, unless there's something that you were doing where your toxins were coming in so quick, your body had to put on fat, and it was going to happen regardless. But if you are gaining weight, it's usually water weight on the scales. And yeah, remember the fat cells can hold the water, so you will swell as well as put the weight on. This for me is a sign that your body is congested. You're not able to, usually if you were moving your bowels 3 times a day and you had no skin issues, like nothing was coming out through the skin, then it would be less likely for this to happen. But if your bowels are slow, if your skin is like clammy and pale and doesn't have good circulation, there's probably a good chance your body is acidic and toxic, and the body needs that fluid to dilute it all to give it time to safely manage it. There will be a point where the body's like, yep, I've fixed all the areas I had to, and now I can remove that excess fluid, and then it will go quite quickly. So it's usually a fluid retention issue. And if you are getting bloating, I did read that if you have a high fat diet, because one of the mechanisms of cholecystokinin and GLP is to slow gastric emptying, the fat stays in the stomach for longer. And if you don't have enough of the enzymes and bile acid to break the fat down, it can make you feel nauseated. So, what I would do if that's the case, because yes, this extract is helping you produce more of those enzymes, but it takes resources and raw materials to make the enzymes to do that. And if you're missing those, then I would go see a practitioner and speak to them about doing a test of some sort to check for that dysfunction. But temporarily, just really watch what are the fats that you're eating and maybe spread them out throughout the day rather than having too much all at once.
Awesome, Nathan. A few of us have actually been chatting about having a checklist before you start using the product, so that we, like, for example, 1 out of 10, how is your sleep? How many bowel movements are you having a day? How much water you're drinking? Because sometimes we forget and we start getting improvements, but we forget that I was only having 1 bowel movement before and now I'm having 3, or that I was having very disrupted sleep and I was waking up still tired and wanting to turn the alarm off and go back to sleep. Now I'm having more restful sleep. Now I'm getting up more invigorated. So I think this is a great idea, a wellness tracker. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a group of us that might, along with Nathan and perhaps some of the other practitioners, that might put something like that together just as a tool for people to be able to kind of see where they're at when they start, and then after a few weeks and then a few months to actually see what has actually happened, because sometimes we forget that that was a challenge, or we forget that we were only doing that 1 bowel movement a day and now we're doing 3. So this is something we will definitely be working on for the team. So thank you, Nathan. I think you've covered so much, and I know there have been lots of other questions come in, but I really feel like you've covered most of it. Do you have any final words or a quick summary of sorts for people to cover kind of everything you've shared today?
A summary for the whole talk.
Just some words of wisdom, or just a
I'll
final
try.
something, a final something.
If you can, 2 a day. First one in the morning, small amount of water before foods, at least 20 minutes before foods. Second one, 7-ish hours later. Get good sleep. Cut out all the foods that you know you shouldn't be eating. Drink more water, 40 ml per body kilo. And just give yourself the time and patience that things are getting better. Maybe go off and get some testing done. Definitely write down and track all of your wellness profiles, all of your symptoms to see that there are changes being made. Go do a little bit more reading about how, visceral fat works and what the benefit of removing it is. And that may give you the motivation to stay on track if things are slow for you.
Perfect. I'm going to put it now on gallery view so you can see everybody's lovely faces. Thank you, Nathan. And Kirsten, perhaps we can do a quick unmute to let everybody say thank you to Nathan before we close out.
Thank you, Nathan. Legend.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thank you,
Nathan.
Nathan.
Absolutely
Thanks,
brilliant.
Nathan. Thanks,
Thank
Louise.
you.
Very good call.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Nathan.
Thanks, Nathan. Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Nathan.
you.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Nathan.
Everybody.
Brilliant.
120 plus thank yous, Nathan. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan and Lillian.
Thank you, Lillian.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you,
Thanks,
too,
guys.
Very, very awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.